All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have John Wineland here with me on the show. John is an author and guide for both men and women in the realms of life purpose, relational communication, sexual intimacy, and embodiment. Super excited to have you here. Hello, John. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Brandon. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is a very timely conversation because, as I mentioned before we started recording, I've just started going to relationship counseling with my partner,
Mm,
and it's something that I'm really trying to get to the core of. Where are my blockages with intimacy? And
mm,
I think relationship is the greatest opportunity we all have for our evolution,
yeah.
and certainly this my current relationship has been brought a lot of my BS, if you will, to the surface and force me to look at it. So I'm sure you're going to have some great wisdom. And before we dive into that, I would like to start with my cliche opening question, which
Mhm.
is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Oh, yeah. My passion is watching people sort of pop open in um, discovering um, what they haven't found out about themselves, right? So I really get off. I teach a lot of workshops, and in these workshops, I get off on watching people pop open
Mm,
and be available to give more love, to be able to receive more love, to be able to play more, to be able to find pieces of themselves that they have either lost or never found, right? And
yeah.
I really love people finding more of themselves, making themselves more available to the world and to each other.
Cool. Well, that is
I have the
a
best. I have the best fucking job on the planet. Really. I mean, I love my job, and I get to watch this all the time.
I can't think of a much more fulfilling thing to do, and knowing from firsthand experience how much there is to figure out in relating and relationship, and it's wild to look at how many people never actually fully go there. I mean,
Yeah,
you see
crazy.
relation
Right? Yeah, yeah.
my parents married 50 plus years, and it's like, guys, you haven't done the work this whole time. Like, what are you doing? It's like
And
just
yet
like
they've stayed together
enduring.
for 50 years, so they must have done something,
Yeah, I don't know if it's the formula that I would adopt, but it has, I guess
Yeah,
you could say, success,
yeah.
in some ways. But if you would, John, just share whatever feels. I always love to give myself and the listener some context. Whatever feels relevant to share about your backstory and how you
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
doing the work that you do.
Yeah, okay, great. So I came to this work, I guess I was my first client, and I came to this
Hmm.
work really after a failed marriage. I don't know, about 20 years ago,
Hmm.
and I realized at the time that the formula I had thought worked for relationship didn't work. Especially
Hmm.
for men, right? That this idea of be a good provider, be a supportive husband to your partner's dreams and goals, be a good father, and that would sort of take care. That was basically the blueprint. Have a little white picket fence in Westwood. I actually thought that was the blueprint for success in relationship. And what I came to find is that there's a whole set of skills, and I'll call them skills because they're learned, that most of us were not taught from our parents. How to communicate cleanly, how to share your truth, how to create and sustain sexual, energy in the relationship, how to keep juice flowing, how to be, both, dear friends and partners, but also be, you know, uh, ecstatic lovers, how to, like, all of those things. We just weren't taught. We haven't been taught, still. And so I came into this, really wanting to know, like, how do you make not just relationship work, but love work? How do you make
Hmm.
love artful? How do you make love deeper? How do you make love, this, how do you sustain that thing that happens naturally in the first 6 months of relating, in an ongoing way? And, it's been a journey. I've certainly had many successful and failed relationships, in the 20 years since, and I'm still learning. But I found a teacher that really spoke to me, and I jumped in with both feet for 15 years of training with him and
Wow.
others. And I also fell in love with men's work in that time, and really, jumped into, men's work, men's leadership, men's embodiment practices, men's spiritual development and spiritual practices, all of the above. And so my work has been primarily teaching what I would call sexual polarity and sacred intimacy, and then also teaching men's embodiment leadership. So those are my two big passions at this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'd love to talk to you about both. And I wish we had hours here today. Maybe we can do it. Almost sounds like we could do one episode around one and one around the other.
Sure.
But since we started on the intimacy piece, you said sacred intimacy. And, of course, I'm sure you've heard I'm such a geek for plays on words, intimacy, and it's really getting down to what's, the core of who we are, and that creating vulnerability with someone else. And so, what is the, you know, jumping off point, the 101 jumping point for someone who feels like, man, my intimacy is really lacking. I'm, X number of years into this relationship or marriage, and where did you begin? And where do
Yeah,
they begin?
right. Well, so I tend to think of sacred intimacy with three pillars, right? That a fulfilling, juicy experience usually has three pillars, and the first is the practice of intimacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is not just seeing into another, but feeling another. It's kind of this sense of creating this sense of oneness or sameness. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm human, you're human. I have a heart, you have a heart. I get afraid, you get afraid. And also to like feel like it's not just, I would say, not just seeing another, but feeling another. So it's an embodied experience of oneness and of closeness and of sameness, right? To feel the
Yeah.
divine in another, to feel the humanity of another. There are practices. Those are actual practices that everything from entrained breathing to eye gazing to certain kinds of sensitivities, developing those things. So intimacy as an art form, as a yogic form or a meditative form, that is the first pillar, right? And the second pillar is devotion to love itself, right?
Mm.
So that's the one where the rubber meets the road. That's the one where most people fall apart, and that is about like, okay, we're in a conflict. What does love? What is our devotion to love above and beyond me being right or you being right?
Yeah.
What sort of practices and intentions allow us to prioritize love, the liberation of love itself, versus a power struggle, or versus,
Mm-hmm.
which is what happens in most relationships, almost all
Yeah.
relationships at some point. And so that's a different set of practices, right? That is, intimate communication. That is nervous system regulation. Like if you and I are in an argument and we're together as a couple, my devotion to love is going to prioritize your nervous system first and foremost. I'm going to prioritize
Mm.
down regulating your nervous system above and beyond me making sure you know my point. I'm going to
Right.
prioritize making sure your experience is validated above and beyond my experience. At least part of it. Hopefully, you'll do the same for me.
Yeah.
And so, our devotion to love itself, above our ego, above our power struggle, above all of that, that is the second pillar of sacred intimacy.
Mm. Wow.
And then the third is what I would call, and what my teacher described as sexual polarity. And sexual polarity is this kind of amplification of, I'm using the terms masculine and feminine, although they're not gender specific, right? Like one partner wants to be the ravisher and the penetrator and the energetic, kind of the one feeling into, and the other partner is the receptive partner, the invitation, the
Mm-hmm.
energy, right? One partner is prioritizing consciousness through the body, one partner is prioritizing energy through the body. And in this kind of polarized arc of sexual practice, where one partner decides, hey, I'm going to let go of my, I'm going to use the term masculine. That's, but again, it's all gender neutral. I'm going
Yeah.
to prioritize my masculine here. And I'm going to let go of my own feminine, and you're going to prioritize your feminine and let go of your masculine. And we're going to turn up those magnets and create this arc of
Mm,
sexual
interesting.
polarity, or sexual juiciness, let's call it, right? Sexual magnetism. And all three of those things, when they're present, create an amazing experience. And usually, when I see that there are couples that are having problems, it's one of those areas is
Right.
one of those pillars is cracked or broken or crumbling, right?
Yeah.
And then we have the temple of our love is weak.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
I can so relate, especially to the second one where you talk about prioritizing love
yeah,
in the form of the regulation of your partner's nervous system.
yeah,
For me and my partner, we're both very fiery, very, and can get into that argumentative, like,
sure,
who's right, who's, and
yeah,
just intense people.
yeah,
And that's been a big part of my journey
yeah,
in this relationship is that very thing, her
yeah,
helping to bring it to the surface and
yeah,
leading that, like, hey, our nervous system regulation is everything first and foremost. Then I'm like, oh, hold on,
yeah,
I've been dysregulated my whole life, or
yeah,
in dysregulating people around me is like, burn it down,
yeah,
and that is, and it really takes maturity
mm,
to stop, the childish. I can see in myself, it's like a childish, I've got to be right, and I'm going to say it over you no matter what, at whatever
yeah,
cost.
yeah.
And that really, I found, has taken a lot of, and it's a work in progress for sure, but
Sure.
training, and just, it's like rewiring those neural networks to look at it
That's
differently,
exactly
like,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly it. Because when we are in, most people understand this now. I mean, every great relationship teacher or relationship therapist has now proven this, from the Gottmans to imago therapy to Terry Real, Stan Tatkin, right? They all talk about how when we get triggered, what gets activated is our dysregulated child.
Yeah.
And so being able to self regulate, to train our own nervous systems to stay out of fight or flight or freeze, or, and stay in this kind of wider expanse of capacity, our wise adult, as Terry Real would call it.
Yep.
That is fucking hard, man. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where, relationships either, learn to become safe places for each other, or they tear each other down and end, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, there is no better way to put it than it's like your child. And it
Yeah.
actually really helps. I haven't thought of it so much in those terms, but in this moment, even hearing that and feeling into that, it's like that is exactly what it is, and it helps by identifying it. It helps to, like, I think, understand what's happening, and if understanding makes it easier. Oh, I want to be my 5-year-old self, kicking and screaming on the floor? No, I don't. I want to leave that part of my child. I want to bring some good parts of my childhood into this moment, but I don't want to bring the little brat that is mad if
Yeah.
he doesn't get his way.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, it's interesting to talk about sacred intimacy in that realm, but
mhm.
you could really think of intimacy kind of needing, three kinds of approaches, right? And this is something that I learned from David Data, who was my teacher for many years. And that is, there's a spiritual recognition, right? Like to see the divine in each other, right? To see the divine
Mhm.
masculine, to see the divine feminine, to see each other's souls, right? There's a spiritual approach to intimacy. Then there's the therapeutic approach to intimacy, right? The spiritual approach can happen in a second, right? Like
Yep.
I can recognize God in you just by
Yep.
looking into your eyes and feeling, right?
Yep.
A therapeutic approach is the one that takes a lot of work and unwinding. It takes a lot of personal work, like to go and do your own inner child healing and to go and do your own therapeutic unwinding. and then to bring that into a relationship, and that takes months or years to unwind that shit and to learn how to work with it. And then there is the yogic approach, which is how do I keep my body and heart open in the moment that it wants to close? How do I train my body to be a transmission of love and presence and depth, or openness and receptivity? That is actually a moment to moment training of the body. It's an unwinding of our limitations, over years, 40, 30, 40, 50 years of tensing up when we feel threatened. And that there's a yoga to that. David got famous talking about the yoga of intimacy. And the yoga of intimacy has a very specific set of practices too. And so, people who really are, let's call it, the cosmonauts of love, they're practicing all three of those things pretty intently all the time. And you made a point at the beginning, which is why people don't prioritize learning those skills is kind of beyond me, right? Because the thing that we suffer most of, once you get past Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you've got food and shelter and all that stuff, is relationship.
Yeah.
Is the that kind of it's like the Vietnam of spiritual practices, right? And so people are realizing now, I think, that's why I have a job, people are realizing like, oh, if I want to be fulfilled in my life, I need to learn these skills of relationship, just like I needed to learn the skills of building a business.
Yeah.
Or I needed to learn the skills of taking care of my health.
Yeah.
Or, and so thank God that's where people are starting to go.
What a concept, right?
Yeah.
Like to even think that we haven't considered that it's necessary.
We didn't need to. We didn't need to. We came together for 99% of human history. We didn't need to. We were like,
Yep.
okay, we need to come together to make kids,
Yep.
to work the farm, right?
Yep.
And we need to come together. We need to come together and protect each other, so that we can survive. And that need to both procreate and the need to protect each other really superseded everything else. But we're now, over the last, let's say 50 to 100 years, we're now in a space where we get to redefine. We don't need those things as much anymore. Women don't need us to provide and protect them, right? Many of them can do provide and protect for themselves.
Yep.
So why are we in relationship is I think it's new. It's a really new, experience in the history of humanity and of relating.
Yeah, it goes along with, I think in terms of our biology, and you're hearing a lot these days about like, we're on the cusp of escape velocity where, you and I could live to be 500 years old. And you have people saying those sorts of things, very reputable people saying, everything shifting. And it makes sense that as our spiritual evolution unfolds, that our lifetime would unfold, and be longer as well. And then okay, well, what's the purpose of being here longer? To do a lot of this work and tap into these deeper parts of our potential as humans, as souls in the physical form.
To love, I would say to love, like, if we're going to be here longer, we really need to learn how to redefine how we love.
Yeah. So I vulnerable share here on my own blocks to intimacy and relationship. And one of the things that's puzzled me a little bit in my own life is, I'm a very loving, heart centered person. So I've always, felt and been a very loving person. When it comes to relating in sex and relationship, I found I have more of a blockage to get truly intimate, and that my turn-ons are more like physical based, like lust based kind of things, right? Kinky things. And it's like, and then you hear about, people having these incredible love making experiences where they're merging into one. And, here I'm so into like spirituality and, tapping into that part of myself. And yet when it comes to sex, it's something that's puzzled me a bit, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand myself, and
Yeah.
and so I'm just curious to anyone who can relate to that,
Yeah.
what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Well, I like to be sort of literal in this, right? Because when we think about the body,
Mm-hmm.
right, we think about sex as an
Mm-hmm.
act. Of course, there's the physical act of sex, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
there's what you're talking about is the emotional act of sex, which is, heart to heart connection.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've learned about the heart over the last, few years, especially with the Heart Math Institute and, Joe
Mm-hmm.
Dispenza's work, is that the heart itself is a powerful um, amplifier, right? It's literally when our heart is activated, our brain waves change, our biochemistry changes, our capacity to feel more and experience more changes. And so there's an actual act to, to activating the heart, to turning the heart on, to connecting to the heart. And when we bring our kink, for example, when we bring our kind of dark, more dark and juicy sexual desires
Mm-hmm.
through an activated heart, we literally are fucking with more power.
Mm-hmm.
We're literally, loving each other with more energy. And so what I think people discover, at least in my workshops, is like, okay, so I'm going to bring these, desires that I have, these corporal physical desires, but I'm going to do so with my heart wide open. And what
Mm.
I find is that there's just more pleasure available, more sensation available, more deeper connection available. But it's not something that we were taught, especially men, right? Men were taught that sex was about stimulating, fantasizing, stimulating, and ejaculating, right?
Yeah, right.
Stimulating, fantasizing, and ejaculating, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
learn as 10-year-old, 12-year-olds to do that in a very short period of time, 3 minutes, we
Yeah,
do it,
two pumps and a groan.
exactly. And then we practice it for years. And then we
Yeah.
start having sex with people and it's the same thing, right? We
Mm-hmm.
just continue to just do that. Now we're doing it in another human's body, right?
Yeah.
And so to rewire especially the male nervous system
Mm-hmm.
to be in connection first and then let things stimulate, right? And then extend the lovemaking experience. The more we extend it, it's like, if you ever work out in the gym, it's kind of like it's in the last few reps or the last few moments that your expansion, your strength really, gets activated, your muscles capacity to grow. Well, it's the
Right.
same with your sexual nervous system. The more you expand it, the more you kind of hang in that semi-orgasmic state with a wide open heart. And
Mm-hmm.
the more your capacity expands. And really, good sex is about expanded capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're all just kind of learning this. I mean, ancient civilizations, Taoist, especially in the East, Tantra in India
Mm-hmm.
and Tibet, and then the Taoist in China and Japan. They learned this stuff, centuries ago. We just, in our puritanical society, never did.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think of Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, if you're
Hmm.
familiar, and it
Hmm.
talks a lot about the importance of just always having the heart open. So
Hmm.
if you're, and that literally is your connection to source.
Hmm.
And so whenever you are making sure you're in a heart expanded state, everything, it's like gas for the car in a
Yeah.
sense. And
Yeah.
so,
And your perception changes.
yeah,
Like how
right.
you see the world, how you see others, like how you see the moment, how you see this interaction
Yeah.
shifts when your heart is soft and open versus when it's clenched and tight.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing there is that when I go into my maybe normal patterns of thought, like say, "Oh, hold on, what about my heart?" Like check in, let me check in here with where
Yeah,
where am I in my heart space, and how
yeah,
activated is that? And
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
take
I
it.
would always tell people like, okay, like literally feel your heart,
Yeah.
feel the weight of it, feel the texture of it, feel
Mhm.
the density of it,
Mm.
and when you do that, and you just kind of then relax it, And there are all kinds of techniques, breathing into your heart, inhaling into your heart like it's a lung, and then
Or
exhaling.
imagining moving from your head down, your awareness down
Yeah,
from your head
sure.
down into.
There's tons of them. There's a, tensing the muscles of your heart and then relaxing with a sigh. I mean, there's so many ways that we can activate the heart. There's literally just
Mhm.
like pounding on the heart and softening
Yeah.
it, you
Yeah.
know. And when we do that, all of a sudden, like we're less driven by habitual,
Yeah.
usually survival driven thoughts.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. 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 So I'm curious for those who are listening who are in a long term relationship or have experienced this where you sort of, the honeymoon is over,
Mm.
it's hot and heavy at first, the relationship is so exciting. And then, you know, we all know this pattern. And then it sets in where you're so familiar, you know everything about the other person. You start having less sex,
Yeah.
and it's, um, the magic is gone to some degree. So
Yeah.
what do you say? Obviously, a lot of what we talked about
Yeah.
is goes right along with this. But is there anything in particular that you recommend for people looking to become, more excited in their love and become,
Yeah. Yeah.
excited lovers again?
Yeah. Well, I think that the analogy of two magnets
Hmm.
rubbing together, right? When we come at the beginning, we're pretty much charged magnets because
Yeah.
nature is telling us to do this.
Yeah.
And then when we live together, especially when we live together, right? And we're together all the time, it's kind of like those magnets start rubbing together,
Hmm.
right? And magnets that rub together start to lose their charge.
Ah,
And
interesting.
so, yeah, and so when they lose their charge, then there's a lot of sameness, but there's not a lot of draw. There's not a lot of like magnetism.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes when there's intimacy, like you trust each other, you love each other, you're safe together, you feel that. When there's sameness, it just means that there hasn't been enough practice of creating difference. You can
Hmm.
think of sexual polarity as the practice of creating difference, right?
Hmm.
I'm, the wild expression of energy, and I'm the depth of consciousness, right?
Hmm.
And these sort of polar opposites. I'm more still in my nervous system, and you're more filled with movement and energetic expression. And so usually what's happening in those moments, you can see it in couples. They kind of act the same. They sort of talk the same.
Look the same a lot of times.
Sometimes they dress the same.
Yeah.
There's just like this. They kind of move in tandem, and there's just so much sameness that there's no magnetism left.
Yeah.
So I would send them to my workshops or other workshops that teach them to turn up the magnets. And
Mm.
sometimes this is as simple as just to make it super practical for people. Sometimes this is as simple as just separating for periods of time,
Right.
and then getting into choose which pole you want to occupy when you come back together.
Yeah.
The other one that I give a lot, and I see in coupleships all the time, is this, date, they end up doing date nights, right? Where there's
Yep.
disconnection. Okay, so we're going to do a date night. But on that date night, it tends to be very more of the same, right? And so what I always recommend for people is, replace date night, at least, one or two a month, with temple night.
Mm.
With temple night, where we're going to set the intention to really connect
Mm.
sexually and intimately. It doesn't have to be sexually. It could just be deep massages or things like that. But one person is, again, bringing their deepest essence. They're bringing the masculine thump, and
Hmm.
the other person is bringing the feminine energy, and they're creating a sacred space. Candles, music, sheepskins, or toys. Even they're they're
Hmm.
they're they're coming together with the intention of lighting each other up,
Mm.
nourishing, right? They're
Yeah.
malnourished in those moments where they're nourished by their closeness and
Hmm.
their safety and their trust, their comfort. They're
Hmm.
nourished in comfort, but
Hmm.
they aren't nourished in their differences. They aren't
Yeah.
nourished by the opposite.
Mm. Yeah. It makes me think. One of the things my partner Karen has started doing is she'll put on our calendar pleasure portal,
Yeah.
and is what she calls it. And it's like, okay, let's come together for this amount of time, and I'm going to give you what you want. You give me what I want, and not sexual.
Right.
We've kind of made it more like for her, she can never get enough words of affirmation from me,
Hmm.
or complimenting, or telling her all the things she dreams of hearing, and it never will get old. And for me, it's physical touch.
Yeah.
If I had my way, I would be getting a massage or rub of some kind at all
Hmm.
day. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what our pleasure portal has turned into, that we've been doing, but it's
Hmm.
somewhat similar,
Yeah.
without the sexual aspect to it.
Yeah.
And it's been
Yeah.
really
Well, I mean,
nice.
I love that. That's love languages 101, and I think
Yeah.
that's really helpful. Also, the feminine does tend to grow by praise, and
Mm-hmm.
the masculine tends to grow by challenge. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is something, but there is so when you come together yogically, let's say you come together, with this sort of yogic experience, one partner is amplifying stillness and
Mm-hmm.
groundedness, and the other partner is amplifying, movement and pleasure. And then you kind of start to bring that to it, and that will, I mean, 30 seconds, one
Yeah.
minute, like very little amount of time is needed for the spark to kind of take off.
Mm-hmm.
That's also dependent on how much sex we want.
Yeah. Right.
Most of us want more than we're getting, or different than we're getting. It's a nutrient, I think is the way I would put it, that many of
Mm.
us are nourished
Mm. Yeah. I like the idea of it being a nutrient.
in.
So maybe we can talk a little bit on this episode too, of in regards to, I know you're really focused on men's leadership and
Hmm.
things like that, and you wrote a book a few years back
Yeah.
um, on this topic. And so, yeah, I mean, what can you give us, of course, high level, what you find are some of the, maybe some of the greatest, quick nuggets you can share regarding men and their ability to step more into their leadership, because they do go hand in hand too. Because when you're in a relationship, I think it's the natural polarity for the man to take a leadership role. Not to say you can't both at different times, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's nature's
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
path.
some people will believe that. I actually think, I think there's a lot of women who are powerful leaders. The way I
My
describe
own
it,
is.
yeah, yeah, the way I describe it is that she wants to know you can lead when she wants you to,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right?
That makes
Because
sense.
she might not want you, she might be way better at planning vacations or doing the finances than you are.
Yeah.
So she should fucking lead, right?
Right.
But she may want you, like one of the things I see, I'll start with women, right? Like, so what women are craving from men more that I see is that they have the ability to step into leadership, that they can become masters of time and space, just to make it real easy, right? Masters of time and space. And in that mastery of time and space, they can create containers, I would call them, right? They can create experiences or containers where she doesn't have to make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
where she can just really be in feeling and love and relaxation and pleasure, and she does not have to make the decision of how is love going to be liberated in our
Yeah.
relationship. You're making that decision. You're saying,
Yeah.
hey, Thursday night at 6 o'clock, you don't worry about anything. You just show up to the bedroom and dressed as you want to be dressed, or not dressed at all, or whatever. And I'm going to have everything set up for you. And that kind of allows her to take off the cloak of her own kind of directional masculine that she has to hold in the world,
Yeah.
and sort of relax into being loved on, being ravished,
Mm.
being penetrated, being right. And if she is indeed feminine in her essence, that capacity to be felt, when I say penetrate, I'm not just talking physically, I'm talking like with consciousness, with love,
Mm-hmm.
to be felt. What women are craving is that we're our sensitivity and depth is so activated that we can feel every movement of her body, that we can feel
Mm-hmm.
her, the depth of her heart's longing, we can feel her soul, right? We can feel the front of her pussy, the back of her pussy, the top of, we can feel everything up the whole center column. And so training men to become more activated and sensitive and aware, the masculine gift is awareness. Like,
Mm.
I'm aware that we're malnourished sexually and we need to come together. And then I'm going
Hmm.
to create something to make that happen. That's the essence of masculine leadership. I'm
Mm.
aware that we have this resentment between us that needs to be cleared. Let's sit down and have a repair conversation, right? That's masculine awareness, right?
Mm.
And there's, of course, she can do the same thing, but she has to put on her masculine to do so.
Right, right,
And
right, right.
she has to, and over time, what I see is that women will get resentful at that. They don't want to have to. Most women, not all, everybody's different, right? But
Yeah,
most
sure.
women who have a feminine essence don't want to lead all the time.
Yeah,
They've gotten really good at it because
yeah.
the world has kind of, demanded it of them, but they don't necessarily want it. And so when I get men, basically what I'm training them to do is to both, open and sensitize their bodies so that they can be more, I'm going to use the term ninja, they can literally feel what's happening in the space. They can feel what's happening in the relationship field. And then I train them to train their awareness, to be able to take their awareness off of thought, which is usually self-referential. What am I doing wrong? Or how do I get what I need? Or about, the things that we spend all our time thinking about. How do I do it right? All that. And to put our awareness on the space, on her body, on the field of our relationship, and then choose what's needed from there.
Mm. Yeah, that's very sound advice. I think it's so easy to get self-referential and, you
So
know,
easy. So
me,
easy.
me, me.
Yeah, it's so easy, man. And there's nothing wrong with it. We all do it, but we just have to understand there's a consequence. When we're self-referential, the people who love us don't feel felt.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I really like what you said too about um, the masculine awareness, and I think in a lot of relationships I see, like you said, it's all unique and different. But I'm someone who's always been very much a strong personality, a leader, sort of energy in most scenarios I'm involved with, and employees and that kind of thing. And in my relationship, my partner is so strong and she's so tuned into a lot of where the gaps are or what needs to be worked on. And so it's almost like a place where I've allowed her more to step into that
Mm-hmm.
leadership because she is so naturally a leader herself,
Yeah, yeah,
and but
yeah,
I can see where it also creates a little bit of a
yeah. It becomes a burden for her
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, right.
A great. It's not an uncommon thing, Brendan. So what I would counsel men to do is to just have a conversation like, hey, I get that you lead our relationship space a lot. And I just want to check, are there places where you want me to take leadership?
Yeah,
Are there places where you would want me to step in and relieve you of that burden? Because if so, I'm totally willing to do that.
yeah.
And I imagine most women will be like, fuck yeah.
You want to get them
You
turned
take it
on?
here,
Ask them
you
that
take
question.
yeah, you can take it here, you can take it here, right? You can take it
Yeah.
here. And then, and then you're like, and then you've got their consent. You're not just kind of wrestling it from them. You're tuning into their heart.
Mm.
And many women did not grow up with a trustable masculine,
Hmm.
right? And if they didn't, then they're going to naturally just have a harder time trusting your leadership,
Hmm.
right? And so many did. Many had good fathers, and but probably if I had to put a number on it, somewhere about 70 to 80% of women that I come in contact with, in some form or fashion, did not have a trustable masculine imprint.
Wow.
And so that means you now get to help heal that with her, but
Yeah.
you also have to fight her resistance around it
Yeah.
because it's scary for
Yeah.
her to let go of control.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious, as if this stuff isn't complex enough, you start looking at non-conventional, non-monogamous, open relationship dynamics and things like
Yeah,
that. And I'm curious, I'm sure we have a fair amount of people tuning in that relate in that way.
yeah,
Yeah, so I'm just curious, what, if
Hmm.
anything, would shift in what you're saying if you bring that into the
Yeah,
picture.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, and I'm, these principles apply kind of moment to moment, and also in, let's say, in polyamorous relationships. right? And for the most part, I mean, I think this is changing, but for years, polyamory really benefited men,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it's changing now where women are actually enjoying the freedom more and enjoying the capacity to have multiple lovers, and right, and but I like to think of these as moment to moment, or period to period kind of skills, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even in a polyamorous relationship, let's say we're in a polyamorous relationship and we're both seeing other people, but it's starting. I'm with my awareness and my sensitivity, my masculine and my feminine. I'm feeling that our relationship is starting to suffer, like our connection is starting to suffer. We're starting to lose each other in
Mm-hmm.
these other experiences. So if I was, taking the masculine pole in that moment, I would bring it. I would say, hey, I love that we're open. I love that we have all this freedom in our ability to express ourselves. And I'm also feeling like maybe there's a few weeks where we just come together and really take care of each other, or really like love on each other, really strengthen our primary bond. And in doing that, I'm bringing my masculine to the field of our relationship and doing my best. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm doing my best to try to amplify love. So the great masculine gift, in my opinion, actually the great gift of all relational humans is to liberate more love and pleasure and depth, right? And so if I'm feeling like we need this to liberate more love between you and me, then I'm going to suggest it. And then I'm going to say something like, hey, let's take a month where it's just you and me.
Yeah.
Just you and me. And then I would say to my partner, how does that feel?
Mm.
And she might say, well, I like that. I like 3 weeks. How about
Yeah.
3 weeks?
Right.
But okay, I'll take 3 weeks. Let's just 3 weeks where we basically let our other lovers know, hey, we're going to close our container for 3 weeks, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
reassess if we want to do it for longer. So we
Mm.
let everybody know. We're not just disappearing on them. We let them know. We close our container, and then we go deep together. So
Mm.
that's one way that I would talk about polyamory, or even the opposite. Like we're too codependent and enmeshed. I actually
Yep.
think that it might benefit us to open our relationship for a few months and have experiences with other people. Same basic idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with it's such it definitely adds a whole nother element, and moment to moment evaluation is probably a very wise advice.
Yeah, yeah, week to week, moment to moment. And and when I think about these practices of especially in the polarity realm, right, or in the intimacy realm, they're moment to moment practices. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like intimacy, like things could be swirling in our relationship, and things we could be having all kinds of things activated, but we can get intimate in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Just breathing together and looking into each other's eyes, feeling each other's hearts. Like we can do that quick, right?
Yeah.
We can turn on the sexual magnetism once we learn the skills in a minute or two. And so we can come together really quickly, regardless of that sort of second pillar I was talking about, regardless of, hey, there's resentments that we still need to clear, or regardless of, hey, there's trust we need to, repair. So it's that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big piece. Is once there's what I've seen and experienced over my own relationships and observing others is the more time in the relationship, the more maybe challenges or trauma, or maybe a moment of trust being broken or what have you. And so it seems like the longer the relationship goes, the more of that can sort of continue to affect and impact.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious what you think about that. Like time in a sense is not on your side. I mean, women in my experience, and once again, I'm not speaking in absolutes, but you know, you get it wrong, it's like they remember everything and feel it, no matter what, and that can present a challenge sometimes. I
Sure.
found.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I've learned recently in the last year or so is that repair,
Hmm.
secure attachment, which is very important in long term relating, happens in repair.
Mm-hmm.
not in the absence of rupture.
Mm-hmm.
Because ruptures are just going to happen. You're with
Mm-hmm.
somebody, you piss each other off and hurt each other unconsciously and do all those things. But how well can you repair those ruptures, and how quickly can you repair those ruptures? And that's where you actually start to trust, like, oh, we're going to fall apart, but we're going to come back together again. We're
Mm.
going to find each other again. And
Yeah.
that's where our little anxious attached selves and our avoidant attached selves can sort of relax and trust that we know how to repair, which is, I think, the one of the primary skills. If I was going to say like the three primary skills, one is, can we get intimate really quickly, right? Like I just described. Can we turn on the magnetism really quickly, just like I described? And it can happen in a kiss. It can happen in a moment, right? And then third is, can we repair? Can we
Yeah.
repair?
It's
And
huge.
that is, if we can do all three of those skills, and we just for your listeners, to make it simple, if you just focus on those three skills, you're way ahead of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Way ahead.
That's, instantly makes me think of, I think it's kintsugi, I believe, if I'm remembering. I'll have to
Yeah,
look it up. Which
exactly.
is
Yeah,
the Japanese,
yeah.
yeah, where they break ceramics or whatever and then repair it with gold and
Mhm.
make it more beautiful than it was to begin with. So maybe your next workshop should be a kintsugi relationship
I
kintsugi.
have a really good friend who owns a ranch here called Kitsugi Ranch. So
Oh
yeah,
wow, how cool!
yeah, yeah.
That's
Sweet.
cool. Yeah, it's a beautiful concept.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, wow, I can't believe we're already kind of getting down to it here with our time today. What that went very fast. What's coming up for you? Well, one of the things, two questions.
yeah.
One, what's in the near future for you? Anything that you're super excited about? And then also, if you have a few moments, I always love to ask a story of inspired story, synchronicity, serendipity, positive paranormal story.
Mm.
So I normally give people heads up of that before we begin, and in your defense, I did not, so they can think
I'll-
about it.
I'll-
So yeah, those two questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you could.
Okay. So, what's coming up for me? Well, every year I do a men's leadership training that's 6 months and
Mm-hmm.
very deep. We do 2 5-day intensives. We go out in the desert,
Wow.
way off grid in the desert, and build a camp and do a whole thing out in the desert by Death Valley every year.
Wow.
And then we also go to Mount Shasta and do a whole week up there. And so that always launches. I think we're launching that in September. And then I also do a very deep year-long teacher training program that's just closing. I think by the time this comes out, it'll be closed. But that's something that I do every year. And those are like deep
Yeah.
dives in men's work, deep dives into the practices we're talking about. And then I also have I have my own podcast I just launched. So
Oh,
it's
cool.
called the Embodied Relationship Experience, and it's available everywhere. And then I built this platform that's this online platform for people who just want to kind of get into the work and be in a global community. We have, I don't know, 500 or so members from around the world. And I take practices from my workshops, and I take content like this from my workshops. And it's in this, kind of well curated platform where you can just push and play. And I lead you guys through a practice at home, or I lead you through a solo practice. And so that's a way that's very inexpensive and easy to get into the work. And so those are the three things that I kind of have going all the time.
Cool.
And then the second question, it's funny. I just remembered this last night. I was telling a friend of mine. So when this was 1997, I got a fellowship. I was studying to be a curator. I went to college to be a curator. Almost got my PhD in that,
Hmm.
and I got a prestigious Rockefeller grant to come here to Austin, Texas, and study with like the leader, the grand dame of it. And at the time I was in LA, and at the time I was just getting sober. Um, and 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 I knew that I couldn't leave my group there because I was pretty fragile still. And I
Yeah.
remember talking to one of my friends at the time and saying, I don't know what to do. I'm supposed to go to Texas, but I feel still kind of like I'm not rooted in my own life yet. And he said, well, why don't you ask them for for a postponement for 6 months. And so I didn't even think about that. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I asked them for postponement. I kind of went, I was scared they were going to cancel my fellowship, or they
Yeah.
were going to tell me no, or all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up coming 6 months later, and I met the woman who I would have a daughter with.
Wow.
And this daughter, became the love of my life. She had this amazing experience. She died in 2018. She was born with an illness called cystic fibrosis,
Oh,
but she
wow.
lived 21 years of just exquisite artistry in the world.
Wow.
She became a world-renowned speaker. She spoke all over the world. She
Wow.
met Bernie Sanders and worked on his campaign. She was Teen of the Year. She was just like, she has
Wow.
documentaries made about her. And that whole thing would not have happened, had I not, trusted my truth in the moment and said, hey, I can't go yet,
Wow.
you know? And that whole thing wouldn't have happened had I not, chosen from a deeper place to stay in LA for another 6 months. So
Wow. And to
yeah,
think of her and her little brief in some ways life,
yeah,
but
yeah,
sounds like
yeah,
incredibly impactful and beautiful and like
yeah.
full soul mission. I'm coming, I'm doing the work, and I'm out. I got things to
Exactly.
do.
And
Wow.
she's got, if you Google Claire Wineland, you'll
Mm.
see she's got
Mm.
millions of views on her documentaries, and has become
Wow.
this incredibly powerful, impactful human on the planet.
Oh,
And I
wow.
miss her pictures back there.
Oh, I was wondering who that might be.
That's
Um,
yeah, yeah,
that's my
yeah,
that's my mother's middle name, so
yeah,
it's a good one. Well, beautiful. What a wonderful note to sort of wind down here on. And what's the best way for people to connect with you and continue to follow your work and everything?
yeah. JohnWineland.com. I've got all of my offerings there, the online offerings and the deep dives, and they can just find the podcast. They can find all that stuff there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I have one final question for you
Okay.
here. It is my cliche closer,
Okay.
and it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to John Wineland?
Mm. Well, I've thought about this a lot. I've thought about this a lot recently as I get older.
Yeah.
And the older I've gotten, the more I realize that it's really about unconditional love, right? It's about giving your love no matter what,
Mm.
to the people who you think don't deserve it, to the people that you're mad at, to the people that scare you, to the people you're desirous of. It's really about giving your love over and over and over again. And I believe that that's what we'll remember, on our deathbed. Like, how much love did we give? How much love did we share?
As cliche as it sounds, it's like one of my favorite quote. I
Share
took a
for a
John
reason.
I took a John Lennon quote in my book actually and did a remix, and the quote is "Love is the answer now." What was the
Yeah.
question? And it's really it, and
Yeah.
unconditional love. I also got to share. It's a funny story. Years ago, there was this site. I forget what it's called now, but where you just be connected with people's chat roulette was the name of it
Mm,
at the time, and you just be connected with people's webcams, and
mm,
you could just skip or keep, talk to them. And then I came upon this guy, and he had like satanic imagery and like, uh, you know, just the pentagrams and just it was like dark, and he's like, answer my riddle or you die, or something, save your soul by answering my riddle. And it was what has no conditions but one condition. And I instantly was like, unconditional love. And he's like, took off his mask. He's like, oh, thank God. I've been doing this for hours. And I said I wasn't going to stop until someone got it right. And you got it. So I was really proud of that. My soul was saved by unconditional love.
that's it. Hopefully mine too.
I think it is, John. And thank you for all your wisdom and helping our souls today on this episode. This has been beautiful.
Thank you,
And
man.
yeah, thank all of you out there for tuning in your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into another episode. Until next time, journey well.